The U.S. economy's rapid reopening is paying off for workers. Many employees are taking advantage of rising wages and hiring bonuses to get the best offers possible from businesses eager to rehire in a tight labor market. But how long will these conditions favor workers over employers? Megan Cassella explains the answer to that question in her latest piece for Politico. And Megan joins me now. She's a trade reporter for Politico. Hi, Megan. Thank you so much for being here and for your reporting. So you write in this piece about this newfound leverage that workers have who are now finding themselves in greater demand. Is this leverage something that could actually last? And can you take us back a step and explain kind of what led to this?
For sure. So it seems like this is not likely to last. It's a really unique moment where what led to this really was the pandemic and the rapid reopening, in which suddenly there was so much demand for labor and there really wasn't that much supply. For a number of reasons, workers were staying home either because they were taking care of their kids or they weren't making their way back yet. They were still taking in unemployment benefits and staying home because of that. They were still afraid of the virus. And so there's just wasn't a lot of supply of labor. And so the employers that wanted those workers really had to start competing for them. That's what we're seeing playing out now. We're seeing wages rise really rapidly, particularly in low wage sectors like leisure and hospitality, at restaurants, for example. And we're seeing bonuses given out everywhere from Wawa to Wendy's, I think it was, places giving out bonuses to say, if you apply or if you come interview with us, we'll give you $500 or $1,000 just to start. But unfortunately, it's not expected to last. As labor advocates would tell you, this is something that as soon as the supply does come back up, which is expected to happen by the fall once schools reopen and workers start looking for work again, we'll be back in the employer-driven labor market that we've really had for decades, where they're not going to have to compete for staff in the same way. You might see wages drop back down or at least not continue rising at the same rate, and those bonuses too are expected to stop as well.
Yeah, it's been so remarkable driving around and seeing help wanted signs pretty much everywhere these days. I want to ask you a little bit more about those enhanced pandemic unemployment benefits that you mentioned, because several states discontinued that recently. They claimed that it was a disincentive for people to find work. What's been the impact of that?
It's really a little bit still too early to say. We're not going to get the federal data that's broken down state by state until next week, the end of next week. That'll really give us an indication of whether there was a clear difference there between the states that stopped the benefits and those that didn't. One of the other reasons it's a little bit early to say, some of those states are getting caught up in lawsuits where there's an open question right now whether they'll continue paying the benefits or not. What I can tell you is, at least based on a little bit of anecdotal evidence, it doesn't look like it made a huge difference. And what that was is it was looking at sort of job search websites and Google Trends and things like that, where researchers were trying to take a look at whether searching for jobs really increased after states cut off the benefits. And while we might have seen some one-off examples here or there, they're saying that overall we're not seeing a big difference based on which state cut off the benefits or not. So that's one indication that maybe it didn't really make a big difference there, but we are going to have to wait a little bit longer to get the firmer numbers on that.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about some Labor Department data, because a new number from the Labor Department shows that jobs at restaurants, hotels, stores, salons, and those similar kind of in-person roles accounted for about half of all payroll gains in June. What's the significance of this?
It shows really that our service sector is opening back up. People are less afraid of the virus. Those lockdown restrictions have lifted. People can go back out to eat again. They can go get their hair done or their nails done again. They can start to travel a little bit as well. And so we're seeing that that's where there's really been this huge demand, like we talked about at the top, for labor. It also shows that's where wages are rising. Those tend to be really high turnover industries. And so what that means is that's another reason why these gains for workers aren't likely to last very long. At least that's the fear. Because even if you hire a new round of workers in and start paying them more right now, it's a high turnover industry where they might need to make new hires in 6 months or a year. And that second round of hires might not get the same wage gains that the workers now are getting.
And we talked about this a little bit, but thinking about those workers in service industries, what do you think is really accounting for the shortage at this point?
I think it's a handful of factors. You can't rule out entirely the unemployment benefits that we've been discussing. It might not be the only factor that someone's dealing with, but if they're debating whether to go back when they have a child at home or they're taking care of an elderly parent or something like that, it makes it much easier to stay home if you are receiving some sort of unemployment aid. So, of course, that's likely a factor, but among many others. The next one being childcare. If your kid isn't in school, if they can't go to summer camp this year, if you can't count on your grandparent or your parent, the child's grandparent, to take care of them anymore, then someone has to stay home with small children. And, we also can't rule out just ongoing fear of the virus as long as variants are spreading. While not everyone is vaccinated yet, there's still some people that say, I don't want to go back to work for as long as I can. Maybe if I'm not worried about my own health and safety, I'm worried about my child who can't get vaccinated or something like that. So I think it's really a collection of things. And the final one that's a little bit harder to measure is just that it takes quite a while when someone's been unemployed for a number of months, as many, many people who are unemployed now have been. It just takes a long time to find the right employer. Employees don't know what sorts of jobs they want to apply to or what's available. Employers don't know who to look for because the workers that they laid off a year and a half ago are likely not there anymore. So it just takes a little bit of time to match that up and to get everybody right into the job that fits.
That's a good reminder. There are so many layers to this beyond those top line numbers that we're all seeing. And before I let you go, I do want to ask you about Gallup's annual report on the state of the global workplace. This shows that workers in U.S. and Canada are reporting the highest rate of daily stress in the world during 2020. So what might be behind that stress, and what are some of the other trends that this report showed?
I thought that was really interesting to look at. I think it just sort of is an indication of how, as much as our economy might be improving based on the numbers right now, every time I talk to economists, they say we need to remember that there's more to this, that just because people are going back to work doesn't mean it's an easy decision doesn't mean they're not facing stress at home in terms of taking care of their children, or that we don't need to have policy solutions to really address what people are dealing with. And I think those survey numbers really underscore that even if someone might be working, it's not just a matter of a paycheck or not. There are other things that are causing people stress, even if they're continuing to work. And I thought it was interesting, too, that it's the highest in the U.S. and Canada. I can't begin to know the exact reasons why that might be, but I would imagine it might be something to do with sort of the different policy solutions that were in place in different countries. If there was more of a safety net elsewhere, that workers weren't as focused on getting back to work right away, and they felt like they had more time or space to stay home and take care of themselves and their families, they might be reporting less stress. Or it might just be another continuation as well of sort of, America has a reputation of being very, very hardworking. People are very driven. I think we already had high levels of burnout even before this. And then this was sort of an unprecedented level of stress and uncertainty. And I think really after a year and a half of this, or almost a year and a half, it's really taking a toll. And that's what the survey was showing.
Yeah, it puts a spotlight on these lingering impacts that we're seeing from the pandemic, not just health-wise, economic-wise, but also on people personally. Megan Cassella, thank you so much for your reporting and for breaking this all down for us. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.